While Godzilla Singular Point is preparing to invade the rest of the world on June 24th, the show is a little more than a month away from wrapping up its Japanese streaming and broadcast run. And it's because the finish line is in sight that more and more production and behind-the-scenes information is slowly trickling into the public square. The biggest info dump recently came in the form of CGWorld Issue number 274, and it's this wonderful trade magazine that will serve up the bulk of information presented here today. But before jumping in, a few things. For one, spoilers are present in this video, so proceed at your own risk. Secondly, I strongly suggest you first check out our History of Godzilla Singular Point video. Not only will that bring you up to speed about the development of this new Godzilla anime, but it also acts as a companion piece to the video that you're about to watch. And lastly, not every Singular Point monster was covered by the magazine, thus that means not every monster will be featured in this video. But if all of that is okay with you, then let's get into the animated creation of the mysterious and strange beasts that make up the Kaiju of Godzilla Singular Point. It is a breath of fresh air to know that the creative team behind Godzilla Singular Point appear to have had very few restrictions placed upon them by Toho Studios when developing everything from the story to the monsters themselves. One of the few requests made by Toho, however, was that the show utilize famous monsters from the almost 70-year Godzilla franchise. For instance, if the story required a more minor monster, the producers would recommend certain kaiju that might be able to fill the role. Series producer Takashi Yoshizawa and director Atsushi Takahashi were the ones who would ultimately decide which monsters would be included, taking into account which kaiju would please fans and which would serve the work well. When the kaiju were decided upon, it would then be turned over to the trio of director Takahashi, monster designer Eiji Yamamori, and concept artist Yuji Kaneko in order to determine what the Dai Kaiju would look like. A great deal of this work fell upon the shoulders of Eiji Yamamori. It was his art that would determine the newness of these updated classic monsters, and fortunately for him, no specific orders were given, so he was basically free to design as he pleased. He kept the reality of Singular Point's story in mind when designing the monsters, hoping the audience would find them convincing. The monsters in this show are creatures that have followed a completely different evolutionary path or branch of evolution than the creatures that actually exist on Earth today. However, we needed to convince people that they did not come from outer space, but evolved in the Earth's environment. With the kaiju drawn, they were then sent over to Yuji Kaneko, credited as a conceptual artist for Godzilla Singular Point, but ultimately the one who acted as a bridge between Yamamori and the CG animation staff. Kaneko's job was to determine the textures and colors of the creatures to be modeled, of which he actually drew inspiration from Noriyoshi Orai's famous advanced posters from the Heisei era. It was a process that took a long time, according to Kaneko, with each monster, including Godzilla, changing at least 5 to 6 times a piece. From there, his work would then be passed on to the CG team, in which they would consult the 2D imagery to bring the 3D models to life. Besides being the monster designer, Eiji Yamamori also supervised how the creatures would be animated, and it is at this point in the process that it seems to have been rather challenging. This appears due to the fact that every kaiju in Singular Point is not hand-drawn, unlike the characters, but are instead a 3D computer-generated graphic, or 3D CG. 3D CG is the same route that the Godzilla anime trilogy decided to take, and despite common assumption, is not a cost or time-saving measure. In fact, at least according to the article 3D CG in Anime, an introduction that appeared on AnimeNewsNetwork.com, it's the opposite, costing more than traditional animation, with 3D CG animators getting paid up to 30% more than traditional key animators. Yamamori, passionate about his creatures and a veteran of the 2D animation process, had a really hard time adjusting to the 3D CG workflow. Little things like making corrections in 3D CG was extraordinarily difficult when compared to 2D animation. Where hand-drawn animation could be corrected with 1 or 2 drawings, any correction made to 3D CG modeling would require changes to all of the assets involved in creating a particular scene. This is why every cut had to have previs or pre-visualization in order to ensure the process be as smooth as possible. At some point, director Atsushi Takahashi had stepped in to help Yamamori, especially in the latter half of the series where a lot of time was spent on the motion study of the monsters. But they worked through it, and as someone said on the production staff, we had a hard time getting people in the drawing field to understand 3D CG, but it was worth it. The first giant monster seen in Godzilla Singular Point is Rodan, the Shogun of the Skies who most recently appeared in 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters. Many of the kaiju, from Anguirus to Godzilla to Rodan, were taken back to basics in terms of their design as Eiji Yamamori turned to dinosaurs and other prehistoric beasts for artistic inspiration. It was prehistoric flying reptiles like Quetzalcoatlus, a giant pterosaur with an almost 40-foot wingspan that lived during the Cretaceous period, that served as the basis of this new Rodan's design. Two types of Rodan soar in the skies of Singular Point. The first one is a psychedelic colored creature that clashes with Jet Jaguar. When this version first appears, it lands on the sign of the Amanosake Brewery, which is a fun homage to the original 1956 Rodan when the creature lands on the Iwataya department store. The smaller, evolved second version of Rodan is simply called Rodan Adult, and the swarming legions of psycho birds bear a closer resemblance to the original creation, including the double horns at the back of the head and a more classically colored brown. Since the creatures rise from the sea, Yamamori wanted to give them the silhouettes common to seabirds, like the albatross. The first kaiju ever to battle Godzilla in the film franchise ventures into the Reiwa era with a design that is my personal favorite of all of Singular Point's kaiju. And, according to the animation staff, everyone's favorite spiky boy wasn't a challenging hurdle unlike some of his monstrous co-stars. "I didn't have any trouble at all with Anguirus," Yamamori said. "Work went smoothly," added Yuji Kaneko. Yamamori again turned to the fossil record when looking for artistic inspiration, looking at thunder lizards that were close to the Ankylosaurus. From Yamamori, "I think that the spines of the Ankylosaurus were originally designed to face the back of the head in order to prepare for attacks from behind. For Anguirus, the spines are pointed forward as a means of attacking the opponent in front." Yamamori also made sure to add a horn and a curved jaw, as these were two features he distinctly remembered seeing as a child when he watched the original Anguirus in the Showa-era films. Of course, this new Anguirus also comes with updated abilities. This time the Spinosaurian can produce a barrier that deflects projectiles. The animation team was given no creative direction as to how the force field should look, so they created various patterns and test footage, including particles moving around the body, before finally deciding on an effect where the colors danced in accordance to the direction of the attack. Jet Jaguar's one and only appearance before Godzilla Singular Point is 1973's Godzilla vs. Megalon, a cult favorite of mine, but a Godzilla film that is not commonly favored by fandom on either side of the Pacific. This is why when director Takahashi suggested Jet Jaguar's inclusion to the production team, it wasn't met with extreme enthusiasm. "When I first proposed the idea, there was not much reaction from the people around me," Takahashi laughed. Producer Yoshizawa gave his 2 cents to when he heard about Takahashi's proposal. "Personally, at first, I thought, oh no." But Yoshizawa had come to trust the direction of both director Takahashi and Godzilla Singular Point's screenwriter Toenjo, and he believed Jet Jaguar's inclusion in the story made sense, so he gave them the all clear. The decision to include the fan favorite robot seems to have been the right choice, because when Singular Point's trailer dropped, Jet Jaguar's appearance became a hot topic amongst fans. "I didn't think it would be this popular," said Takahashi. Animating Jet Jaguar proved to be more difficult than the other monsters, with a lot of time being spent into creating the mechanical movements of the creature, as well as correctly capturing the comedic aspects of the character's animation. Throughout the 13-episode run of Singular Point, Jet Jaguar is constantly changing, suffering battle damage and upgrading his equipment. To correctly convey the damage, designer Eiji Yamamori would create reference images of scratches and other damage in Photoshop for the 3D animators to reproduce in their program Substance Painter. Manda is cool, Manda is neat. Manda is a basic Eastern dragon, at least that's how he's been depicted from his original debut in Ishiro Honda's Atragon to his last appearance in 2004's Godzilla Final Wars. Updating this design with a unique sense of newness is a bit of a challenge, and this was not lost on Yamamori, so he turned his sights a bit smaller. Looking towards the alien world of insects, Yamamori took a liking to the centipede, imagining what the centipede's many legs would be like if they were made into fins and how it might move through the water. It is possible that the insectoid inspiration for Manda at one point might have gone even further than just centipede legs because Yamamori himself has stated he wanted Manda to have a strong insect element. However, after discussing it with director Takahashi, the bug motifs were lightened up and more classic Eastern dragon traits were implemented. The fins of the lionfish also made an appearance, fins that were designed to swim while undulating. The 3D model for Manda was based on the tail of Godzilla Ultima and required 3 animators to meticulously animate the creature whose whiskers, fins, and mouth were apparently a real challenge to deal with. Sarunga. The nightmare beast first appears in the bowels of a mysterious base in Singular Point and is technically making its debut as an original kaiju, even though it might look very, very familiar to some fans. But more on that in a moment. Sarunga is named after Sarunga, the celestial bow of Vishnu in Indian mythology, a tidbit even incorporated into the creature's final design, with a bow-like shape appearing on the monstrosity's brow. According to both Yamamori and Kaneko, Sarunga was the most difficult part, requiring a lot of work and a lot of trial and error. The beast appears to have been the brainchild of director Takahashi, who had the strong image of an ape or monkey baring its gums menacingly. Designer Yamamori made sure to incorporate this into the monster's form, using the skeleton of a Galata baboon as a point of reference. However, Yamamori felt early designs looked too human to be a monster, and he wanted to get away from the image of an ape. So he mixed in the elements of a rhino, with some reptilian elements such as the skin and the way the mouth opens and moves, and perhaps the most interesting part, added Gabra and Baragon to the mix. Gabra is the villainous bully monster that has so far only appeared in 1969's Godzilla's Revenge. Baragon, on the other hand, has had a few more stints, first battling against Frankenstein in 1965's Frankenstein Conquers the World and getting obliterated by Godzilla himself in Godzilla Mothra King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All-Out Attack in 2001. Their added likeness to Sarunga follows similar patterns in other Singular Point kaiju, creatures that have the traits of Titanosaurs, Varan, Megalon, Kumanga, and Hedorah, but are technically none of these creatures. Why is this exactly? Well, as of this video, it's not entirely clear if it's just an artistic choice or a story-inspired one, but I'm gonna go ahead and keep the editorial speculation out of this particular part. The one editorial note I will make, however, is that Sarunga is an awesome addition to the Godzilla kaiju roster, and concept artist Yuji Kaneko was right when he said it was a lot of work, but when it was finished, I thought it would be one of the highlights of the series. Like Shin Godzilla, the king of the monsters that appears in Godzilla Singular Point has multiple forms throughout the show, before evolving into what we currently assume will be its final form in Godzilla Ultima, and it's this specific form that we're going to be focusing on. It appears Toho didn't place a lot of strict creative rules upon Eiji Yamamori when he initially designed the new Godzilla, a creature producer Yoshizawa hoped would invoke hopelessness and despair. One rule that Toho did have, however, is that this Godzilla could not be based on any previous incarnation. So Yamamori went back to basics as he had with the other monsters like Anguirus and Rodan, and started with the form of a Tyrannosaurus, seeing how he could make a monster of it. According to the production team, Yamamori also had Godzilla 1954 on the mind when drawing Ultima, even replicating the skin after the Showa Godzilla. But even with the old movie influence, he also wanted the design to be biologically correct, something that didn't look like a suit that could be worn by a man. This is why its legs were drawn thicker in order to support its huge body, why it's more bent forward than usual. The tail was made long in order to add motion to the picture. Folds in its arms and legs were motifs derived from the rhinoceros, serving as protective measures against attacks. Ultima's huge gaping maw was a suggestion made by Yuji Kaneko after he looked at the skull of a saber-toothed tiger. Yamamori was also apparently incredibly conscious of making Godzilla's movements as lifelike as possible as he supervised the animation, keeping everything in mind from how gravity would affect Godzilla's leg muscles to making sure Godzilla didn't swing its head too fast. Because if it swung its head too fast, its brain's inertia could potentially be too much and it would smash against Godzilla's skull. Though this level of detailing might seem superfluous, it really is that kind of methodology and attention to detail that has really distinguished Godzilla Singular Point, a series that was written to be both as an entertaining ride and a hard science fiction spectacle. Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video in its entirety, and I'd also like to give a big shout out to all of my super chatters out there, all of the people that have joined the streams, that have donated to this channel, because through their extraordinarily generous donations, they helped get us the materials that we needed, the equipment, as well as the software needed for translations, and with all of those elements together, that's what put this video together. And it means the world. I thank you guys so much for doing that. On that same note, I would like to say that if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it, commenting on it, and sharing it, and also subscribing to Monstrosities, a vlog of Tokusatsu. The truth of the fact is that YouTube doesn't do us, Monstrosities, any favors. So if you guys could, if you like this video, please, again, consider sharing it. It helps out so much. I have seen the analytics, I have seen the proof since the beginning of the year to now. There's been a substantial difference in where we were to where we are right now, and it's because of you guys, because of the watchers and viewers of this channel. Thank you again for your time. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you later.